There are some places that people say are cursed. When you hear the phrase cursed place, what do you imagine? Maybe it's an ancient burial ground, a dense forest, or a rundown shack in the middle of nowhere. Well, sometimes the most terrifying cursed places are the ones we pass by every day. Take this abandoned house, for example. It looks like any other house from the outside, just very old. But when you hear its history, it becomes clear why nobody has lived here for 40 years. Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host. And today we're going inside one of the scariest houses in America. It was love at first sight for Eleanor Vance when she saw the old Victorian home at 1632 13th Street. Built in 1897, the grand brick house had 14 rooms, each filled with more space than she could have ever dreamed of. There were high ceilings, intricate moldings, and enough bedrooms to fill 3 average-sized homes. It was the type of place where a family could live for generations and never get bored of it. So you can understand how excited Eleanor was to buy the home and make it her own. However, there was one problem. The house was quite run down and would require hundreds of thousands of dollars to restore. Fortunately for Eleanor, she had recently come into a large sum of money when her father died and left her his fortune. With all the money she needed right in her bank account, Eleanor hired a team of contractors and began fixing up the house. For a while, everything went well. The workers enjoyed the beautiful weather as they put new roofs over the house and repointed the crumbling brickwork. But then, strange things began to happen. At first, it was only minor inconveniences. Tools went missing only to be found days later in strange places. Then, one day, a worker was using a chainsaw to cut down a tree when it suddenly turned on him. The chainsaw jammed into his arm and nearly severed it clean off. As soon as he was taken to hospital, the work stopped. Everyone agreed it was bad luck to continue working on the house after what had happened, so they all packed up and went home. But Eleanor refused to leave. She had spent far too much money and time on the project to abandon it now. She moved into the house with her son Thomas and her 2 daughters, Catherine and Elizabeth. Eleanor hoped that living there would help her overcome the bad luck, and so the family settled in as best they could. At first everything seemed fine, but as the weeks passed, the family began to feel the oppressive atmosphere of the house. They couldn't explain it, but it felt as though they weren't alone. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, they would hear footsteps pacing back and forth in the attic above their bedrooms. Other times, they would wake up to whispers just outside their doors. Eleanor tried to convince herself it was just old pipes and settling wood, but even she could not explain the unsettling feeling that swept through the house every night around 3 a.m. One morning, Eleanor was sweeping the front porch when she noticed something strange in the floorboards. At first, she thought it was a spider hole, but then she realized it was far too big for any kind of bug. The hole seemed to go down forever. It was also a perfect circle, like a miniature black hole sucking the light out of the world. Feeling uneasy, Eleanor grabbed a stick and poked it into the hole. Whatever she was poking was hard, like wood or metal. Just then, her daughter Elizabeth approached from behind and screamed when she saw the hole in the floor. In a panic, Eleanor quickly covered the hole with a rug and told her daughter to keep it a secret. As the days passed, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching her every move. One afternoon, she decided to look around the property and see if anything had changed since she bought it. That's when she found the well. It was hidden behind some bushes and overgrown vines, making it almost invisible. As Eleanor stared into the dark opening, she couldn't help but wonder who had used it all those years ago and where they had gone. That evening, as the family sat down to dinner, Thomas, Eleanor's son, mentioned that he had seen some children playing in the yard that afternoon. His mother and sisters had been inside at the time, so it must have been them. But Eleanor knew this was impossible because she had checked on the security cameras and no children had been anywhere near the house. Thomas shrugged it off and went back to eating, but Eleanor couldn't stop thinking about it. Who were these children, and where did they come from? Why didn't she see them on the security cameras? Was it the curse she had read about in the newspaper articles? Over the next few days, the sightings continued. Eleanor would catch glimpses of children running through the trees, even though no one lived nearby and no children had been seen for decades. Then she began seeing apparitions of adults standing in doorways and watching them from the upstairs windows. One evening, Eleanor was reading in bed when she heard footsteps walking up the stairs. Slowly but surely, they came closer and closer until they reached the door. Her heart pounding in her chest, Eleanor called out and asked who was there. No answer. Then the doorknob turned. Just then her daughter Elizabeth walked past the door with a flashlight. When she stepped into the room, the door closed on its own. Both mother and daughter screamed at the top of their lungs. After that incident, the family knew they had to leave. But before they could pack their things, the house struck again. In the middle of the night, lightning flashed and thunder roared, shaking the house to its foundations. Then the front door burst off its hinges and flew down the stairs, landing on the lawn below. Eleanor grabbed her children and ran away as fast as they could. They never looked back. Soon the house was empty once again, just the way it had been for the last 40 years. But the truth is far more sinister than you can imagine. Years later, investigators uncovered the reason for all the strange activity. The land where the house stood had been used as a burial ground for Native Americans centuries ago. When the town was expanded, the graves were dug up and the bodies moved to another location. However, not all the remains were recovered. It's believed that the spirits of these people remained in the ground and refused to move. That's why Eleanor and her family experienced so many disturbances. They were simply the latest victims of the vengeful spirits beneath the house. They say that when you disturb a burial site, you invite evil into your life. What do you think? Is this true? Let me know your thoughts. And thank you all so much for watching. I've been your host, and if you haven't already, be sure to follow for more scary stories. Also, check out our other series, Scary Podcasts, for more terrifying tales.